So I'm very excited to be here. When I first got invited to this conference, I was going to talk entirely about the Odyssey as a parable of male aging. And then as the time drew near and I looked at the amount of time I had, which is, if you include lunch, almost 6 hours, I thought to myself, that may be a little bit too long for one topic. So I decided to expand the frame just a little bit. We won't lose anything from Odysseus, but we'll gain some new and relevant information. I wanted to, and this is at no extra charge to you, by the way. I wanted to include two related topics. One of them is the extraordinary spiritual challenges, processes, awakening that's happening in this new aging, this unprecedented longevity that we have right now. So we're going to talk about the secrets of that process and how it's already happening in our lives, and you may discover that it's happening more than you realize. And the second thing I'm adding is the amazing ways that these issues are illustrated in myths and fairy tales, and particularly in elder tales. Because elder tales are these wonderful brief stories that are packed with wisdom when you get inside of their symbolism. So in other words, I wanted to have a larger vision of what it means to be a man, from Odysseus, who's coming home from this long and awful Trojan War and trying to find his way home to his wife, all the way through to our current aging and then beyond, and to where we may be headed spiritually. So it's fascinating stuff. It all ties together. It will stimulate your personal growth and spirituality. I guarantee it. And books are available on the topics out there if you're interested. What Aging Men Want, Bedtime Stories for Elders, and 3 Secrets of Aging. So if you want to go deeper, there they are. So let's get started. So as Ed explained, I've taken a real interest in conscious aging in recent years, and that includes men's aging. After a long involvement in the mythopoetic men's movement, as he was referring to, going into the Mendocino, deep into the Mendocino woods with Robert Bly and Michael Meade and James Hillman and other people, they were always inviting the most amazing people in, like Jack Kornfield or Gary Snyder or Malidoma Somé. Anyway, we'd spend a weekend there drumming and dancing and hearing ancient myths. And Robert was working through Iron John at that time, so we were, talking back and forth about what these different chapters meant. And then after participating in numerous men's groups, gatherings, conferences, and retreats over the years, and then specializing in men in my clinical practice, I began to notice something rather strange, something rather peculiar was going on. I began to notice that the men I was working with were getting old, like me. I mean, who'd have thunk? How is that even possible? So the topic suddenly became increasingly interesting to me. And I began to wonder, well then, what do aging men want? I mean, does anybody even know? Do aging men know what they really want? So, I'm here to tell you that Homer was actually one of the earliest experts on men and male aging, and he's here to help us answer that question. And all through this talk, you are all invited to get involved, because you are experts too. You are aging men, you are men living this experience, you're women watching aging men, and the stories that I'm going to be telling you have so much depth that any insight that any one of you has about a story will contribute to our general understanding of that story and it will grow our capacity to appreciate its meaning. So anyway, get involved. I'll give you lots of opportunities. So let's get started. What do aging men want? And how does the Odyssey help us find our answers? Well, I mean, the first part, what do aging men want? Well, hey, it's obvious, right? Isn't it just really obvious? Don't old guys just want to retire and play golf and fish, travel, volunteer, watch sports, start new businesses, see the grandkids? And what more could they want? And anyway, don't most old guys say they're busier and happier than they've ever been in their lives and everything is great? Well, after carefully interviewing 40 men who I knew really, really well, colleagues, friends, clients, relatives, people whose backstories I knew, and I'd known them for years, so that they were not going to, put the snow over my, what's that phrase, over your eyes? Never mind. Anyway, so after interviewing these guys, I came to appreciate that the happily ever after story is what a lot of us say, but it may not be what we're living yet, or the story may not be really coming true in our lives. And here's another surprise. Their wives kind of felt the same way. the wives kind of felt like they had a different perspective on their husband's happily ever after story. So I began to realize that aging and retirement, and I'm sure most of you already have had this experience and appreciate it, but aging and retirement are far more challenging than most of us really appreciate until we get there, until we move through its stages. Because the happily ever after myth of retirement glosses over the inner work that we have to do in this time. The transition from busy, middle-aged family man and hard worker to wise elder really is more complicated than it looks. It's a long, transformational journey through many stages and phases and issues. Aging is a developmental stage in the human life cycle, and as we all know, every new stage comes with new tasks and gifts and surprises. Like adolescence and midlife or marriage and kids, you may have thought you knew what you were getting into and had a plan for how it was going to work. And how often did that really turn out the way you expected? All of life is like that, and aging in particular. So if you think that we're all ready for aging, it's time to buckle your seatbelts, and the ride is probably going to be bumpy. It certainly was for Odysseus, and it certainly was for me. So I think we're all in good company. And judging from the age I see out there, I think you've been along many bumps already. So I'm talking to a group of wise elders, I am convinced. So how many of you do remember Robert Bly's book, Iron John? Yeah, it was really, really seminal for so many of us. That it was really for midlife guys who felt they had climbed the corporate ladder or done what they were supposed to do and were, coming into their own, and who felt dead inside, who felt like they'd lost the soul, the wild man who they were born to be. And they were coming into these men's gatherings just, with crying about their fathers, struggling with how they had sold out to the patriarchy for a life that wasn't going to be truly theirs, and that the second half of life was really much more meant to be the journey of the soul, the awakening of the soul, not more grinding out money and success and popularity. So I wanted to find another myth or fairy tale that would describe this late life journey. And we have the midlife passage and we have the late life passage. And what I found was it was crazy, was the Odyssey. This long, complicated, Homer myth that seems like full of craziness. Can you recall the Odyssey from high school English? Did you all have to read it? Or those movies about the Odyssey that you saw? Remember the Cyclops? Big eyes, Zeus's son. He locks Odysseus and his men in the cave, and they have to stab his eye with a red-hot poker. It's really juicy. And the sirens, whose beautiful song lured men into the water to their watery deaths, and a woman who could turn men into pigs, and storms that could destroy Odysseus' ships over and over again. It is a incredibly swashbuckling, rollicking, fun, good story, but it's also a highly symbolic cultural dream. It's a cultural dream, virtually a roadmap of the journey home, and that's what we're going to discover as we walk through the many adventures that Odysseus has. They are our adventures as well. Transcribed 2,700 years ago from this blind poet, Homer, the Odyssey, tells this epic story about an aging warrior coming home after a long and brutal Trojan War. And his Odysseus, by the way, his name means trouble, if that gives you a hint about what he's getting into. But what's so interesting is that the war goes on for 10 years. If you've ever read the Iliad, don't ever read it again. It is so awful. I mean, the violence and the vengeance and the backstabbing and the vanity, it's just, it's men at their worst. So anyway, Odysseus is coming home from this 10-year war. Takes him another 10 years to get home. 10 years to get home. And I'll show you this map. You don't have to really see it clearly, but this is the Mediterranean. So here's boot of Italy and North Africa and Greece and Spain. So he starts over here in Troy. He only has to get to here in Ithaca where he lives. So he can go by land, sea, and landing, go around. Well, he goes over here, then gets blown over there, and then goes over there, and rushes up there. For 10 years, he's getting ping-ponged all over the Mediterranean, one thing after another after another. That's a metaphor for aging. You don't just go from here to there. You get ping-ponged through a whole bunch of really interesting issues. So, We will all encounter storms like that. We will all get bounced around. And the journey really is a journey for men of finally coming home to open the wisdom of the heart. Now, the deep meaningful story of the Odyssey is about giving up the warrior life and coming home to love. It's by giving up the warrior mentality of quest and conquest and competition, success, performance, productivity, fixing, doing, going, all that stuff that men are so good at. As we age, we lose that drive. We get tired, testosterone levels drop, ambitions fade, things change. But if I give up the warrior, me, the guy that can handle anything and go anywhere, who will I be? What will I do? Where will I fit? What good am I in? And what does it even mean to come home to love? Don't I just love just fine? Well, at first glance, a lot of people won't see this story as relevant to their lives because they may be in the first stage of aging. And the first stage of aging, the young old, well, the first part of that is very much like the middle years. So you have all this energy and you can still go out and climb mountains and start projects and so forth. So you think from that position that you're going to conquer aging as well. How well did that work for people? Okay. Also for men, denial is always much safer than vulnerability. And it's easier to say that's not me, but denial doesn't serve us if we're going to be growing. The Odyssey, as we will discover, is all about personal growth in the most amazing ways. And it's also about the aging patriarchy as well. The Western culture is, as you know, is a fundamentally patriarchal culture, and so is most of the world. And the patriarchy as an expression in behavior and attitude and values of this ingrained warrior masculinity, it's like a demand planted in a boy's soul way before he understands the implications of it and permeates our culture. And in the men's movement of the 90s, which I was so much a part of, men were really saying, I don't want to be that person anymore. I got sold a bill of goods. And the recent research from the American Psychological Association, talked about the real psychological harm of this kind of dark patriarchy, this overriding a child's natural unfolding with this prescription of male energy. While healthy masculinity engenders strength and responsibility expressed in community service and the hero's journey of personal growth, generations of men, like most of you guys and me, were enculturated instead into a different kind of view of manhood. Fierce competition, ambition, and power, and climb the ladder and make money and be somebody important. This is shadow masculinity, okay? And it's the masculinity that has long subjugated women and minorities and indigenous people in other countries. And it's now being called toxic masculinity. And it's planted early in the souls of boys. So anyway, the Odyssey, therefore, is also a story of the patriarchies trying to come home, its long, slow struggle to achieve a mature awareness of how it forms and what it's about and how it affects people. And an awareness of itself and the world and divinity so that it can move from a war-based value system that was portrayed so well in the Iliad to the enlightened consciousness of the immanent divine as the world itself. Wow, there's a journey from a war-based value system to the enlightened consciousness of the immanent divine as the world itself, which is the hope for our future. So this timeless myth depicting our transformation from raging, testosterone-driven warriors to spiritually and mystically mature wisdom figures is really an ancient gift from the deep archetypal psyche about what men are and what they're trying to do and what needs to happen. It is so full of wisdom. It's a story, therefore, both of individual and cultural transformation. So I want one more point. To summarize, the Odyssey is this timeless allegory of what it means for a man to come home from the wars of adult life. We guys are out there competing for everything. The all-encompassing drama of comparison, competition, heroic quests, endless battles for status and power and money and love. Implicit warfare not only permeates the journey of manhood, it really defines it. It defines it at so many levels. And I want to underscore that point. In the last 3,000 years, technology has changed. The world has changed, but the underlying biological and instinctual forces driving a man's personality and his culture have not changed very much at all. Every aspect of this story is alive and well now. You can find it in movies, sports, business, religion, politics, war, video games, TV shows, .coms, relationships, everyday life. It's been said that business is warfare in slow motion. And that's a lot about the way it is. Look at what Google is doing. They conquer one thing, or Amazon will conquer one thing after another after another. Take no prisoners, crush the competition, take it all. You think that men have transcended their violent nature? There was a big soccer match in Egypt in 2012, and between two popular teams, and afterwards a brawl broke out. 74 people were killed. But it's just a game. It's just a game. Homer painted a picture of masculinity in war that is every bit as alive and pertinent today as it was then. We may sublimate it a little bit better, okay? I mean, you go to an NFL game and the warrior is still in full expression with painted faces and raging attacks on bad calls and violence so constant that men's bodies are broken for life. We're still doing this thing. Or consider boxing, cage fighting, hockey, the list goes on. In many subtle ways, the Roman Colosseum is alive and well. We're still throwing men together and seeing who wins, who can beat up who. In male aging, though, and this is where we have an opportunity to make an enormous difference in the culture. In male aging, we are finally called back to the sentimental heart that we put aside in junior high school when war called us into the necessary competitive atmosphere. In the new aging, this unprecedented longevity that we are all living, baby boomers are invited into a new stage of life, challenging us all to leave the battlefield of the Iliad, open our hearts and come home to a new kind of love, to an awakened love that is actually more than spiritual, it's mystical. And that's what we'll be talking about later this morning. So I know this has been a long preamble to the story you're desperately wanting to hear, but I wanted to put it in a really personal context for us. This is not just a historical artifact, okay? We are living it right now. I mean, look at the daily news. Okay, so here's the second question that I posed in the beginning. How does the Odyssey help us understand what aging men want? And in particular, what we may want as aging men, or what are the developmental tasks that Odyssey tells us we need to face? Because of the time constraints, well, the Odyssey describes the developmental tasks men confront when they try to come home from this war of adult life. The 10 years of it. And you know, after I retired, I had to retire early because of a health problem. And I thought I was just going to jump into the next 10 years. It took me at least 10 years to really get my feet on the ground about who I was now and what my call was and what gave my life, what brought my life into focus. So this is not an instant thing, and it's not an overnight thing. This is a process that is going to change us, and if it changes us, we can help it change the world. So I studied this tale. I found 18 tasks that Odysseus had to deal with. And I divided them into 4 categories: early mistakes, transformational experiences, homecoming, and final challenges. And so we don't have time to go over all 18, so I just picked out 9 for illustration, but you can get the rest of them in the book. It's all right here. So your job as men in the audience, is to notice which adventure somehow pushes your button. You know, which adventures where I'm reading along or talking along about it, and something happened, you can say, "Oh my God, he's talking about me," or "I did that. I remember doing that." So we'll see and then we'll check in to see if this hits home any place. And for women, your job is to try to understand the deeply painful path men and their patriarchy must now take to come home to love. It's not about letting them off the hook. It's understanding that this is not, when you betray your soul at the level at which the patriarchy demands that you betray your male soul, it's painful to find what you've lost and how many years you've lost and what you want to do to come home. So anyway, you are part of the story too. In fact, what's so interesting about this story is the divine feminine is everywhere in it. She is saving his butt all the time, whispering things in his ears, telling him what to do. No, don't go there, what you need to do here. And so you'll find that it's sort of an allegory of the wedding of masculine and feminine at a most transcendent level. So, by the way, just quick survey so I know where you are in the path. How many of you are over 65? Raise your hand. Oh, look at that. I'm speaking to my tribe. And how many of you are retired? Yeah, well, I knew where I was coming anyway. Okay, so let's get into the story now. I'll describe these adventures, and we'll talk about what they mean. And then this is like a quiz show, a TV quiz show, and then we'll see if any of you can identify what the problem was that Odysseus was working on. And we'll work our way through his adventures home. So, his first adventure, and this is in the category of early mistakes, so considered a mistake, goes like this. The cruel Trojan War, it finally ended. This gruesome, ugly war finally ends. They win, Odysseus' team wins. He and his crew head for home. The wind takes them to the south coast of Greece, to a land populated by a group called the Cicones. Odysseus raids the seaport, slays most of the men, takes women as slaves, acquiring considerable plunder. Rather than leaving quickly, Odysseus' crew hangs around drinking, slaughtering animals, having a good old time, giving the Ciconians time to send for help, and soon a fierce giant fighting force comes over the hill and scaring Odysseus' men, 6 of whom die and the rest of whom race desperately to get on their ships and get out of port as fast as they can. So that's his first mistake. What's happened here? I mean, what does this symbolize? Any guesses? What? Oh, but yeah, that's certainly there. What else? And that would be a mistake. Well, this first big mistake is really that nothing has changed. I mean, he's coming home from war, and now he's going to be coming home to his wife. Things are going to be different. First thing he does is start fighting again, beating people up, killing people, stealing things. And so he continues his warrior way. But the next pertinent question is, how do modern men do that? How do we modern guys leave this war and actually keep doing a war? Any ideas? Be brave. You'll come. Oh, be brave. Yeah, that's it. Be brave. What? Golf. Yes, that's one of them. We play golf as if it were a test of personal worth. We tend to be CEOs in our own homes. We start a major remodel of the house to have something important to do and direct. We take on dangerous athletic challenges like climbing mountains to prove that we are still virile and strong, and we start new businesses. In other words, we have to succeed, produce, and conquer everything we try. Now, so this is that early stage of adjusting to aging, and it's sort of a denial and overcompensation stage. But we all do it. I did it too. But it doesn't get you any place. It gets you some more time to fill, and more things to accomplish. And if you're doing it for good causes like fighting climate change and fighting for racial equality and so forth, that is wonderful. So all of these things have a double side, a dark side and a light side. But for the developmental process of coming in touch with your soul, this is a distraction for Odysseus. And the patriarchy's homecoming is the same. When one war ends, we just start another one, or we plan space travel or Arctic domination or new weapons. And knowing that war instantly generates more attention than peace, politicians stay in power through patriotic fervor. Giant corporations conquer one sector of the economy after another. Greed and violence create a kind of hunger that is never satisfied. It's just never enough. And as men face the patriarchy, we are the patriarchy. I mean, we absorbed it so deeply that it is we that have to change, and that we have to mentor others to learn about change too. In order to sublimate these underlying male instinctual energies that are what we're made out of, but to more constructive, positive, holistic causes. And that's the purpose of coming home too. Now listen. Now here's the next mistake Odysseus makes. This is a good one too. So he goes to grieving his lost companions. Odysseus and his men are caught in this violent, supernatural storm. Powerful sea and wind currents finally deposit their ships at the south coast of Greece. I'm sorry. They go on for 10 days, and they get to this land. So they're blown across the Mediterranean for 10 days, and they land on this island of the lotus eaters. Island of the lotus eaters. The inhabitants of this island share the honey-sweet fruit of the lotus with their visitors. It's, actually opium. So all who eat this fruit lose the will to work, completely forget the voyage home, and to escape, Odysseus has to tie his really intoxicated guys to the mast of the ship and get out of there for them to sober up. That's the next mistake he makes. How do modern men do this? Any ideas? Well, how do we fall asleep in our aging process? Think alcohol, drugs, TV, computer games, surfing the net, compulsive exercise, all sorts of ways we can spend time not being in touch with why we're in this process altogether. In fact, when we play too many video games, we don't even know that we're on a journey home. I mean, this is just so compelling and interesting. So we get completely sidetracked and we forget the purpose. This aging process has this profound intrinsic archetypal purpose to it. And Odysseus, as messed up as he is, he seems to has a North Star he keeps following. He seems to know that what he's doing is just not it yet. So he moves on to the next thing and to the next thing, and that's us. So does this remind you of any of the ways you may have wasted time or fallen asleep on your journey home? I bet it does. Okay, so the patriarchy puts men to sleep too. I mean, with dreams of male superiority and money and power and fame and fancy cars. And it poses this imagery early in a boy's life. By contrast, indigenous cultures, and I'm not idealizing them, but I'm talking about the archetype of this. The indigenous archetype was that you send a boy for initiation, and he's guided by the men in the village, and then goes out on a vision quest of some sort and stays out there as long as it takes for him to receive a vision in a dream or a mystical experience or a sign or something from the Great Spirit that lets him know why he's here, what his gifts are for the tribe, and then he is able to come home and be welcomed as a man. It's that kind of initiation that helps a man become men, rather than get taken into this rigid category of what a man's supposed to be. So without such rituals, I think the need for initiation, which kicks up again in adolescence, by the way, I think that's probably what drives adolescent acting out and risk-taking and drugs and all sorts of things, because there's an unconscious longing to be initiated into what's sacred and cosmic and big, and instead they just get in trouble and wind up in jail, or other things happen, they die. So what happens is the longing for initiation goes dark. Their souls fall asleep for years. They drink the Kool-Aid of the patriarchy, and they join this false masculine, and then they begin to wake up at midlife. Malidoma Somé, who was an initiated African shaman who used to come to those men's gatherings, talked about midlife as being like a clock ticking, and he says that you come into this world for a purpose you've arranged with the elders from the other world, and then you forget it. And then at midlife, the clock starts ticking, and you start getting really restless because some deep level you know that you're not doing what you came here to do. And that's what this whole healing process needs to be. So anyway, third mistake. Let's look at the third mistake Odysseus makes. So Odysseus and his guys, leave this place, and they end up on a floating island, just floats on the surface of the sea, enclosed by a rampart of bronze, high wall, very, very strong, impenetrable. The island's king, Aeolus, has 12 children, evenly divided between sons and daughters. With no other people on the island, he requires his sons and daughters to be consorts. But nonetheless, they're all wealthy, well-fed, live in great houses. The king and his wife entertain Odysseus and his crew for a month, and asking questions about the journey and what he's doing, and they're always interested in Odysseus. Eventually, Odysseus wants to go home. I mean, that's the whole. Again, he's remembering, I'm here to be coming home. So he asks for directions. As a parting gift, Aeolus gives him a tightly sealed leather bag holding all the errant winds that would blow him off course. Only the west wind is out there to blow him all the way back to Ithaca. It's a lovely gift. So off they go to home. Aided by the west wind, the men travel swiftly for 10 days. Odysseus, anxious to get home as fast as possible, refuses to sleep. He sails his ship all by himself for 10 days, night and day, never sleeping, never having rest. He reaches the shore of Ithaca. Just when he sees it in sight, he passes out. He just falls asleep. He can't do it. His men, at this point, looking at the leather bag, get kind of curious, what is in this bag? So they open the bag, and out blow all these winds, these errant winds, who blow them all the way back 10 days to this island of the king, and the big ramparts and so forth. So he comes back to and when this happens, when he wakes up and sees what he's done, he is nearly suicidal with grief. He knows he's made a terrible mistake. So he returns to Aeolus' island and begs the king for assistance once again. Please help us. This time, instead of embracing Odysseus, the king orders, get off the island, and proclaims that any man that the gods punish in this form is no friend of mine, and I'm not keeping him here. Go on your way. So he kicks him out. So what is this story about? Any thoughts in this process? What is he doing here? Here is a king and his family who appear to be totally self-contained on an island with impenetrable ramparts. Even the children marry each other. Nobody needs anybody else. Everything is provided. The island is a powerful symbol of narcissistic self-sufficiency. I don't need anybody. I got it all right here. And the idea that a man can and should handle everything by himself. Build gated communities, need no one, increase your wealth. That the island is untethered, it's just floating up there, means that it's not connected to the earth, to the deep self. So it's all just a head trip, it's a mind form rather than a fully integrated, embodied experience of being alive. So it is that Odysseus, filled with this elixir from this time on this island, this elixir of self-sufficiency, being strong, needing no one, sails his boat for 10 days without going to sleep because he thinks he can do anything. He is once again the compulsive warrior, handling it all. So he falls asleep because he's not emotionally ready to be coming home. He really fooled himself on that. He's not emotionally ready to be coming home. The reason is that all of his chaotic emotions, unfinished issues, are stuffed in that bag. That bag and the winds are a symbol of his emotional chaos, which he's stuffed in there thinking, I just control it and override it and get home. And of course, that doesn't work. It breaks open. The greedy sailors that go with him are really part of that same sense of looking at self-sufficiency as the source of all wealth and gains. And the question is, or the answer really is that self-sufficiency is not an answer to aging. None of us can do this aging thing alone. I don't know, how many of you are in men's groups? Oh, good for you. I love men's groups. I've been in men's groups for the last 25 years, and the one I'm in right now, guys would not miss it if their wife plans a vacation. They make her change the date. I mean, a men's group, an older men's group is a place where we don't have to do this thing we used to do anymore. We just hang out and talk about the stuff of our lives. I mean, we keep politics out, and we keep, sex out. We keep a bunch, well, not necessarily. We keep a lot of things out that are just, only going to get us in trouble, religion and things. But they don't want to talk about that anyway. They want to talk about what happened today and how they feel about it, and how, one of the oldest guys is now talking a lot more about dying, and we're all talking more about dying because we need to talk about dying and what it means and how we prepare and how we would worry about our wives. The whole thing needs to be a part of a men's group. Incidentally, I have a part of the What Aging Men Want in the back that talks about how to form a men's group and the stages that it goes through. So anyway, we can't do it alone. Self-sufficiency is not going to work. It's just going to create more isolation. And so the patriarchy also is into this self-sufficiency thing. That's all about it. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps, overcome every obstacle, be ruthless in the face of threat. You recall how King Aeolus, when Odysseus comes limping back, he's really broken. He is just so in pain and guilt and so forth. And what does Odysseus do? He kicks him out. No compassion, no appreciation for what's just going on. It's an attitude that is so ruthless that it just doesn't make any room for compassion affection, intimacy, friendships, community, or diversity. Or to quote Paul Simon, I am a rock. I am an island, and an island feels no pain, and that's my solution to aging. It's not going to work. So those are the early mistakes he makes. Are they making sense? Can you kind of see how they might work in a guy's life? Yes, no? Yes? Okay. Tell me if I'm off track. So anyway, transformational experiences. Things happen now, whether he wants them to or not, that are beginning to change him, to beginning to push him to work through issues that he never even realized he had. So he and his crew come to an island where Circe, a beautiful witch, turns men into pigs with a magic potion. Now that is a metaphor. Just think about that for a minute. How does a witch turn men into pigs with a magic potion? Okay. How do men act like pigs around beautiful women? Well, think flirtation, think sex, think alcohol, think hormones, think male competition. Anyway, with the help of Hermes comes down to help Odysseus, deal with this. Gives him an antidote to the medicine because his sailors come in. She says, "Hi, fellas, come on in here, have a drink," and they have a drink and they turn into pigs. That's how the story goes. But he's been told about this, so he takes this antidote, so it's not going to happen to him. So he fearlessly consumes the drug, confronts her power. They go to bed as equals, real two equals, not playing games, and then insists that she turn his men back into human beings, and a great feast follows. So what is this great? Now this is a transformational thing because it forces him to look at things he's not looked at in his life. One of the things, this is where Odysseus begins to confront his long-established male attitude towards women. Now, instead of objectifying and sexualizing them, which would turn him into a pig, right? He consciously prevents his own sexual intoxication, addresses his underlying fear of women without acting out, and then insists on an authentic, honest, equal, straight-out relationship. No more games. This is important stuff for us guys. It truly, truly is. How do we need to see women as true equals and guides? Interesting, the feminine, as I said, is constantly helping Odysseus. Athena, Zeus's daughter, is always shape-shifting into somebody else or appearing invisibly, whispering in his ear. Circe, the witch, who now is his friend, tells him what to do for the next 5 adventures. She's helping him that much. Calypso, he's going to meet, who's going to be the divine feminine and help him heal a lot of broken places inside. Penelope, his wife. I mean, so it's really a beautiful... the divine feminine is all around this guy as he's stumbling home, thinking he's in charge. So, if this, how does this attitude represent struggles that all of us men have had? That was part of the indoctrination. That was part of the manhood thing that we needed to sort out. And this theme of power-based sexual objectification and manipulation is very much a part of the trained-in patriarchy as well, and it defends its gender inequality. It's everywhere. Whether it's pay, power, or porn, government, corporations, and religions have always been male-dominated, and the costs have been detrimental to everybody, to women, family, culture in so many ways. I came across this interesting study the other day by the World Bank, which looked at 35 indicators of legal equality in 187 countries. Legal equalities like property ownership, inheritance laws, pension policies, rules governing marriage, movement, travel, pay, personal safety. Guess how many countries came out equal? Any guesses? Very close. 6. 6 out of 187 countries where men and women were literally legally treated as equals. And yeah, any guesses? Nope. Kind of. Not America. Yes, Sweden. No, not Iceland. I love Iceland. Denmark. Yeah. So Belgium, Denmark, France, Latvia, Luxembourg, and Sweden. So I know where I'm retiring. Yeah, France, yeah. That was kind of a surprise. Now, I mean, this is not my study, but this is what they found when they made a careful examination of the laws. So here's the next adventure. So Circe, who is now his friend, his guide, his real tutor along the way. He tells him that the next place you need to go, Odysseus, you need to go to Hades, which is not quite the same thing as saying go to hell, but it's kind of like that. So he has to visit Hades. So he and his guys find the mouth of Hades, and it's a really crazy tale. But there he meets fallen heroes from the past, from the war, who now painfully regret their behaviors. He meets his deceased mother, who died brokenhearted because he was gone for 10 years in this war. Okay? And he meets this blind seer who is going to and his mother. So he meets his mother who died of a broken heart. But while she's talking to him, she tells him that his wife and his son Telemachus have been suffering immensely while he's been gone. I mean, this is what he has to confront when he comes into this underworld. And then he also meets this blind seer who gives him a prophecy about his last task once he gets home. We'll get to that later. So this is Odysseus' descent, really into the personal and the collective unconscious, okay? Here he must confront his past, his regrets, the costs of his values and cultures, choices, his choices and behaviors, the reality of... I mean, he had to realize that I went on this heroic male thing because I was going to fight this war. The start of the Iliad was the most ridiculous start for a war. I mean, so Zeus, this is a quick aside, Zeus is having a wedding for a goddess and a mortal, okay? As a big celebration up on Mount Olympus, and everybody's invited except one goddess, whose name is Discord, who might have been excluded for that reason. She's pissed off, she gets mad, she writes on a golden apple, "For the fairest," throws it over the fence. So then all the goddesses start fighting over, well, who's the fairest? And they want someone, like a judge, to rate them all and choose. Zeus won't take the job. He's way too smart. But they pick this guy Paris because he's supposed to be honest. So then they all start trying to bribe Paris, with things so they can win. Well, Aphrodite finally wins by bribing him that he will have the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. Only problem is she's married to the king of Sparta. Well, that's all right. So they go off and abduct her and bring her back, and that starts the war. That's a good reason to have a war, wouldn't you say? So anyway, that's just an aside. So Odysseus has to look at all this stuff. What kind of a life have I led? And he has to look at his wounds as well, and the way he has betrayed his family and himself. This is also a metaphor, at least for our generation, of the way men went off to work and spent more time, 8 or 9 hours at work, came home tired, and did not have the time that they really needed with their families. So it's a process of of coming to terms with all those kinds of regrets. So we have to examine our past, what we've hidden in the unconscious, what our life has meant. This is emotional maturation. This is looking back, understanding what happened, asking forgiveness and making amends. This is profound stuff that we men do, and it's really one of the critical tasks of conscious aging. It's the task of life review. So anyway, and you can't go forward until you've really appreciated what you've lived through, and it's a profoundly meaningful experience. So he runs away feeling overwhelmed because the spirits are now rushing out and terrifying everybody. But the thing is that he's actually faced a lot here. He's just going to take a long time to integrate the material that he's gotten in touch with. And that's what we all do. Over the course of these adventures and over the course of our aging, we get in touch with stuff. And we say, oh man, I should not have done that. Oh, I feel so bad about that. That's the beginning. And then it's a matter of how do we begin to process that with the people that we love. So the patriarchy too needs to look at its grave historical sins, its imperialism, slavery, sex trafficking, wealth inequality, and its role in bringing on the greatest disaster of all in our time, which is climate change, with its greed, corruption, unbridled power. Global climate disruption really is going to be a moral accounting of what the patriarchy has done out of its blindness for profits over people. So anyway, those are transformational experiences. Look at what happened there. I mean, he has to face his feelings about women. His whole past comes pouring up to him. So he realizes he's not who he thinks he is. Being a warrior was just a cover for all of this other stuff that he was going to work through. So now we get to homecoming challenges. Is there a clock in here? I want to make sure. Oh, there we are. Oh my God, we're running fast. I think it's just when you're having fun, Okay, so anyway, he's going to come home after all of his ships are destroyed by Zeus for violating the rules of a sacred island. Incidentally, he started this whole trip with 12 ships and like 300 men, and at this point he's hanging on to a piece of the driftwood from the ship. I mean, that's all he's got left. And that's a metaphor for aging too. Aging is a surrendering of so much of our power and authority and reputation and who we think we are. So anyway, he's saved by this beautiful goddess named Calypso, who falls in love with him and offers him eternal life with her. Eternal life with her if she'll just marry him and be her husband. And the relationship actually kind of works for a while, maybe actually 7 years. It's kind of amazing. But then Odysseus begins to pine terribly for his wife, Penelope. There's a beautiful scene where he's on the shore sobbing uncontrollably. Just his heart is breaking. And this is really hard on Calypso because she thought they had this wonderful thing going on. But she being a goddess, she being of divine, finally understands what he needs and why he's doing this, forgives him and helps him build a raft to be able to sail on home to Ithaca. So what does this adventure mean? Calypso, in some sense, is the divine feminine. Her love is healing, and it needs to be unconditionally healing for so long. And men can do this in many ways. I mean, it may be like spending time alone. It may be, you have to think about where you find that kind of comfortable appreciation for your life, and whether maybe it's a retreat, maybe it's spiritual direction, maybe it's a lot of ways in which we begin to bring the unconditional, loving divine into our lives. But it doesn't solve the bigger problem for Odysseus. She may be the perfect woman, and this may be the perfect place, but it's not his wife, and it's not his family, and it's not his home. And there comes a time when he needs to choose to come back to real people and the real life that he left. So we too can find all sorts of perfect scenarios, country clubs and cars and island paradises and cruises and so forth. But in time they become distractions. They are not home. So he's maturing here. He's getting ready to come home, and his pining, his longing for his original life and for all that's unfinished in his life is bringing him home. So the patriarchy, of course, does this too, hanging on to wealth and power instead of working through. I won't go into that because we're losing time. Then there's this thing where he gets back to his palace. Athena makes him sort of invisible so he can wander around the palace and see what's going on. And all these suitors have taken over his palace, and they all want to marry his wife Penelope because they figure, she's an amazing woman anyway, but that's not the real reason. If they marry her, they get his kingdom, they get his whole empire. And all the suitors in the village are having this competition, and they're making her, and it's coming to a point where she has to choose, because Odysseus has been gone for 10 years. Everybody thinks he's dead but her. So this is the time when she's going to be forced to marry one of them. So what happens is that Odysseus and his son and some aides set up this ruse, and they end up having this great battle with all these suitors, and they end up killing them all. It's a brutal scene. So the thing is that the suitors represent Odysseus' own warrior impulses, because this is a dream. So everything in a dream is about the dreamer. And so what he's come home, and when he comes home, he faces the fact that all of his needs to control and dominate and run the show are still there, and he has to weed them out so that he can begin to have a real relationship with his wife, because they are still holding his wife captive. He's not having a real relationship because he's still telling her what to do and how things should be and what happens in the fort and so on. Aging men do likewise. We spend years just sort of letting go of the things we thought we had to do to be important in the family or be important to our wives or run things, and in the process we really come home to a much more gentle, soft relationship with hearth and home. I mean, it just feels so good to not have to be a warrior anymore. I mean, have you had that feeling? It's so good not to be a warrior anymore. And so there's two final challenges, and then we'll see where we want to go. He comes home, he's worked his relationship out with Penelope. It's a beautiful scene. It's so subtle in its dynamics about how she has to really prove to herself that this is him and not just somebody acting like him. In other words, that this is the man she fell in love with, not the guy that became a warrior, is the metaphor for that. Anyway, so the reunion takes place. Then he goes out looking for his father. And he wants to visit his aging father, who he finds working in the back garden of this estate. He's dirty, his laborer's clothes, he's looks like a servant. But then Odysseus is a very cunning guy. He always watches things before he actually interacts. And so he begins to notice that his father actually looks rather content, rather happy. And they meet and embrace and restore the relationships. But what's happening here? Odysseus' father has entered a new consciousness of age, okay? The symbolism suggests that he is harvesting, he is appreciating the growing fruits of his life, symbolized by all the garden he cares for, and he is caring for the sacred earth, okay? It's not about conquering the earth, it's about being present to it and making a genuine, loving connection, a communion with the earth, which we had as young children and we can have again as old men. He has, in effect, returned to the garden with a capital G and made peace with the nature of old age. It's really very sweet. So, I mean, and the thing is, how have you done the same kind of thing? How have you, in your aging, found a space of peace where it's enough just to be present to a grandchild or to do the dishes or to sit in the garden, or to, whatever it is, and you discover that it always was enough. And then the last one, we get to the prophecy from the blind seer from Hades. So this blind seer said, Odysseus, once you get home, once you make up with your wife, once you work out your kingdom stuff, there's one more journey you have to take. And he tells Odysseus that he has to travel inland until he finds someone who mistakes his oar for a winnowing fan. On that spot, he is to sacrifice a ram, a bull, and a boar to Poseidon, whose son he blinded earlier, and then make individual offerings of cattle to every god in the Greek pantheon. That's the seer's prophecy for him. So what is this about? I mean, it's from another culture, so it's easy to get lost with sacrificing animals, but there are universal substrate here. He has to take a journey inland, inside of himself. He has to go within. And the oar is a symbol of masculine power. Enough guys in an oar in a boat, they can go against the tide, they can go against the winds, they can overcome a lot of things just by being strong men with a purpose. So he has to take that symbol of masculine power so far inland that nobody knows what it is, and the person that he meets thinks it's a winnowing fan. Now, a winnowing fan is this big fan, that goes back and forth, separating the chaff from the seeds, and the wheat production. And it is a wonderful symbol of discernment, the ability to separate what is important from what is not, what is dead from what is alive, the husks of warrior masculinity from the seeds of new growth. This is what he has to, this war is lost and becomes this capacity for discernment, for discrimination, for inner awareness. And the three animals represent the masculine instincts of sex and aggression, which he has to sacrifice in his aging. The offerings to the gods symbolize his recognition that he needs to face all facets of the divine, all faces of the divine as it appears in the world. So while these symbols come from a culture that are it's different from ours, they are timeless in their significance. And the ritual marks the initiation of his spiritual journey. See, this is where he finally comes home to love and then goes inside and begins to explore the deeper spiritual questions that have always been part of his life that he never had time to look at, and now with this space he needs to go into. So he's being initiated, he's being transformed, and he's being awakened to a new awareness of the divine in the world. And which is, ironically, and a good segue to the 3 secrets of aging, which we'll get to. So basically, these have been 9 of the 18 challenges that men have had to face. The first 5 challenges had to do with dealing with his central problem, which is himself. The second had to do with the cultural and spiritual transformations of coming home from a way of life to a capacity for love. And in the final challenges, he makes peace with old age, the world, and divinity, opening a new stage of his aging life, which is a very profoundly spiritual stage for him. Now, I should point out this is not a checklist like a supermarket list. You don't go to the market and say, I did that one, I'll have to do that one tomorrow. These come up as we go along through aging, and because it was like chutes and ladders, the kids' game, you go up here, you think you're about to win, and then you're down at the bottom again, then you're over there. Aging is messy. If you haven't noticed, we get ahead, we slide back, we climb up again. He gets knocked around all over the place. He repeats the same mistakes, trips over his arrogance again and again, and eventually is defeated by aging, because aging really is the defeat of the ego. You cannot conquer aging, you cannot make it into what you want it to be. And so you must instead be transformed by aging, and that's what this whole conscious aging movement is about. So anyway, just one quick question. How many of you guys could identify at least one of these tasks that kind of made sense to you as who you are? Oh, good. Thank you. And how many of you women notice these things among the people you love? More hands go up. We don't have, I was going to go deeper, but we don't have time. But to make a long story short, this is why the happily ever after fantasy of aging and retirement doesn't really work. You don't just go from point A to B, and you're not a realized human being. You're just a guy with a bunch of stuff in the leather bag that's going to blow open sooner or later. The continuing need for healing and growth in this final stage is profoundly important for ourselves as men, and for our relationships, and for our world. And so here's one thing I want to do, and then we're going to shift gears. I want to know what your most fervent desires and longings are in this time of life. Now, I want you to do it anonymously. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out a piece of paper and write, without putting your name on it, what you want most deeply from aging. 2 lines. 3 lines, 1 line, just whatever it is that has called to you. What do you want from your heart of hearts and your soul of soul from your aging years? And then when you're done, fold it in half, put M or F on the outside so we know the gender, and then let's pass them all up to me and we'll look at them later. Maybe the simplest thing to do is once you have them all folded up, what should we just put them on the piano when we're done, or what would be the easiest way to collect them, you think? Okay, you could. Okay, well, yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much. We'll pick them up and we'll. And after lunch, I'll bring these out and we'll read some and we'll see what our audience has talked about, what people have wanted most. Thank you. Just put them on the piano. So let me, before I wrap up this first part on Odysseus, let me share with you the answers that these 40 men gave me. These are the kinds of things that these 40 men told me about what they want most from aging. So from Odysseus and the men who share their lives with me, I believe these represent many of the fervent desires of aging men. Number one, we want to leave the war. We're tired of fighting. We're tired of competing. That's what a men's group is all. Younger people think being in a men's group is going to be scary because everybody's going to be, it doesn't happen in men's groups. They just want to be friends. We want to come home to love, whatever that means, wherever your home is. We want a place where we are back in the aura of love. 3, we want to help, okay? Children, grandchildren, friends, old and new, we want to help the world in some meaningful way. 4, we want to share our lives. We want to tell our stories. We want to offer wisdom and humor and experience and the sheer joy of living. I don't want to die alone with nobody. No, I want to share it with my kids and my grandkids and my friends. We tell stories all the time in our groups. It's just such a rich experience. Number 5, we want forgiveness. We know we've been selfish, self-centered, even stupid. I've been stupid at times. I look back and I think, wow, could I have said that? How could I have done that? And we deeply regret the pain we've caused. Can you forgive us? Can we forgive ourselves? 6, we want to matter, to be needed and included, not just looked after as cookie-cutter old people, the way so many of the younger generations look at us. We want to stay involved with family, friends, sports, politics, music, whatever it is. We want to be engaged in things. And we want passion-filled and meaningful work, not necessarily work about money, but work that is in the service of our soul. We were born here, as that indigenous myth says, we came here for a reason. Now is the time to have a new blossom of that reason, to share it with the world, to give back. We want to have fun, too. Laugh, dance, watch movies, go out for dinner, be silly, sporting events, whatever. 10, we want to be seen as unique individuals. None of us, aging is the most diverse time in the human life cycle. There are more differences here than at any other time in history. We want to celebrate those. That's individuation. That's Jung's notion of individuation, which also translates to eccentricity, by the way. We want to keep learning, computers, history, metalworking, art, genealogy, whatever floats your boat. We want to find meaning. Whether it's in history, philosophy, religion, or something. What has this whole experience meant that I've lived through now? What happened here? Especially through the lifespan we've covered. We want physical connection, and experience. Getting old doesn't mean you give up the body. Hugs and exercises, sports and nature and love and sex is just a little bit different. We need just to be slower and more contactful, but a hug can make your entire day by itself. We want to stay as independent as reasonable. We want to be thinking about and prepare for death. Death is always difficult and scary, but we want to talk to our family, our friends, our clergy, our doctor about, what are our options and how do I feel? And it's going to evolve over time. You don't make that decision once and it's for all. You unfold it. 16, we want to awaken a spiritual comprehension of life. The mystery. What is this? What is happening? Where will I go? Where am I going? And we want our culture to wake up from its incessant drumbeat of fear and war. Danger, child abductions, terrorists, weapons of mass destruction, caravans, immigrants, death panels. Be afraid, be afraid. I'm so tired of that. I think most of our men are too. So that is the story of Odysseus and what aging men want. And I wanted then... Are we okay to keep going, or do you need to do a bathroom break? Are you? Okay, we'll get to lunch then. So, with the time left, I want to look at this journey of male aging in a slightly larger frame and through another lens, which I have here in the 3 Secrets of Aging. It's a perspective that will take us from Odysseus to the spirituality of a new kind of aging, maybe even a new kind of human being. You see, we are not throwaway people. We are in a process of transformation that can remake the world. So it's really, really important to get what is happening. So while Odysseus began to encounter these secrets, and we'll see how far he got with them, in our new aging, we will know their power, and we will explore them in ways that will transform us. So, science, medicine, and technology have extended our lifespan by decades. In all of recorded history, only 1 in 10 people could ever hope to get to be 65. Okay, now in developed countries, nearly 8 out of 10 people will get to be 65. And if you get to be 65, you got another 17 years on the average for men, 19 for women. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's amazing. What was once reserved for only a tiny fraction of people, I mean, no wonder elders were revered, is now potentially available to most of us. I mean, it's astounding, but what is it for? We don't have a model of what aging is really for. So the old model was you retire, you get your watch, you got a couple of years, you sit on the porch, you die. So you're just really kind of waiting for the reaper. That's not it anymore. This is a whole new kind of aging. We are experiencing a new developmental stage in the human life cycle. I find that awesome. I never knew there could be a new developmental stage in the human life cycle. I thought they were all there. We might define them differently, we might research them, but a new one, a brand new one with new tasks, gifts, and surprises, and that has tremendous implications for spiritual growth and collective spiritual evolution. So I want to share these 3 secrets and put them in this larger framework. So these are secrets because basically nobody wants to talk about aging except in groups like us. We're willing to get involved and talk about it. But, on the bus, on the airplane, hey, how old are you? What do you think about aging? And they, it's better than the opposite. And then the conversation ends, right? People still in this culture want to overcome aging with exercise and attitudes and creams and surgeries and cruises and new jobs and new mates and new houses and new this, and it doesn't work. In the end, aging wins. But that doesn't mean you lose, but it means you have to surrender to a life-transforming process. And that's what we're in now. So here are the 3 secrets of this process, and see how they may already be affecting your lives. Secret number 1. Aging is an initiation into an extraordinary new stage of life. That kind of comes with my introduction. The secret says that the events and processes of aging, changing bodies, fading identities, losses of all shapes and sizes, represents an initiation into an entirely new dimension of life, a time of personal and spiritual growth unprecedented in human history. So that while aging may represent the end of your old life, it's also the beginning of a new one. Angeles Arrien, who wrote a wonderful endorsement of that book, put it this way, she said, "The second half of life is the ultimate initiation. In it, we encounter those new, unexpected, unfamiliar, unknowable moments that remind us that we are a sacred mystery made manifest. If we truly understand what is required of us at this stage, we are blessed with an enormous opportunity to develop and embody wisdom and character." I mean, that really sets the stage. So here's the point. One day, in your aging, something will shock you into realizing that everything has changed. And you're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. This is a different place. And that moment marks your initiation. It can be medical, economic, social, emotional. It could be a big event like what happened to me with a heart issue, or it can be an accumulation of little ones that just add up and push you over a tipping point. But then, it just dawns on you then, without a doubt, that your life has been forever changed. It's not going to be what it was anymore. That's your initiation. And then huge questions come up. Who am I now? What do I do with myself? What is this time for? How will I face my future, including my decline and my death? Nothing seems familiar. Isn't that what aging feels like? Like, what is going on here? A shoulder replacement, a hip replacement, a hearing aids, atrial fibrillation. What's going on here? But it's so much more than that. But here's the magic. If you pay attention, you will also discover that an unexpected adventure in consciousness is already happening. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, if you don't recognize aging as an initiation, you'll miss the power, and importance in your life. You'll hang on to the old identity, whatever that was, and you'll keep on doing the same tired imitation of who you used to be, but that won't bring you through this stage. That won't bring you the real transformation or happiness. Odysseus could have continued being a warrior, all his life, but he never would have found the kind of love and freedom and spirituality he found at the end. He had to give up his lifelong warrior identity to enter this new and uncharted. That's the whole point of it. It's uncharted. We can't define it. You don't have a thing you're supposed to do and then you've mastered it. His repeated defeats, foolish mistakes, many regrets, shook his confidence and complacency. They woke him up to the fact that it's not the same. That's the initiation. Have you noticed that something has happened and you go, whoa, this is not Kansas anymore? Oh, have you? Yes? So second secret. This secret says aging is a transformation of self and consciousness. Aging is a transformation of self and consciousness. The secret says that aging is enlightenment in slow motion. It begins spontaneously, naturally, subtly. As we wake up from the illusions of mind, we transition from personal identity to the consciousness of divinity, giving birth to the enlightened elder. I'm going to repeat that and then we need to unpack it because it's a huge statement. Aging is enlightenment in slow motion. It begins spontaneously, naturally, subtly. It just starts happening. As we wake up from the illusions of mind, we transition from personal identity to the consciousness of divinity, giving birth to the enlightened elder. So Secret 2 says that you and the identity you've had all your life can disappear. To begin with, I think it's pretty obvious that much of the you used to be is disappearing or now long gone, right? I mean, is your body the same as it was in the middle years? How about your appearance? Have you seen your latest photo? One of those family pictures about a wedding or something, and you look at it and say, who is, oh my God. It's horrifying. But it's just the beginning. So do you still play the same social roles that you did, parent, worker, householder, have the same identity that you did in those career years? Instead of all that, now you wear this funny disguise as an aged person. What a crazy disguise. Look in the mirror. There's nothing left of the old you. If that's not transformation, I don't know what is. And it's only the beginning. It's only the beginning. This disappearance of the old self, body, career, identity, is part of the emptying of aging. It's like tacking a jigsaw puzzle of your life on the wall. You know, there you are, and I did this, and who I am, and all my symbols and things that represent me, and blah, blah, blah. And then watching the pieces start falling out. Falling out. Spoiler alert, God shines through the spaces, but we'll get to that in a minute. And this deconstruction of the old self marks the beginning of this great and central archetype of aging, which is death and rebirth, which happens to be also the central archetype of enlightenment, death and rebirth. The surrender of the old you is what the mystics have talked about for eons as a prerequisite for enlightenment, and it's happening naturally in aging. And we'll take a survey in a few minutes and see if you can really find it. What happens next in this process of the transformation of self and consciousness is even more amazing. It goes on. The first thing that happens is you have a further evolution of the true self, who you were born to be, your most natural inner self, who you really are. It keeps blossoming like a flower, especially now that the performance pressures of the persona and the middle years and the duties and the rules and all that stuff have faded away. Okay, my older friends are doing the most amazing things now with their lives, things I never would have expected. Like, whoa, when did you start doing that? It's marvelous, and it didn't come from the head. They just started doing it. That's this new ground of being that rises up inside from your true self is finally given a chance to be free of the rules and be what it has always wanted to be. Now, if you have to be patient and trusting, because if you keep driving the truck over your garden, it's probably not going to happen. You know, or if everything that happens, you pull it up and say, "Is that it?" It's going to die. It's interesting. I have a blog on my website, and you know, I sometimes write, I sometimes don't. And I can tell by analytics that people read them. But there's one blog And I get one answer at most, or two. No, I don't know if they're even reading them. One blog has got like 35 to 40 responses on it. And I keep getting more, and it was written like 4 years ago. And it's a blog about the loss of ambition in aging. And so everybody, says, "Oh, thank you for writing this. I thought I was neurotic. I thought I was depressed. I thought I was lazy. I thought there was something wrong with me." And the fact is that I have to keep saying it over and over again. You're like a horse that's been let out of the corral, At first it doesn't know how to be free, and it even looks around for another harness. And so, but with time and with patience, and if you don't push it, if you just nurture it with love and kindness and interest and look at your dreams and so forth, something new, a new blossom, a new flowering of your true self will happen. And that will give your life a whole new energetic meaning. I guarantee it. I mean, you just have to give it time. Now, the second path in this transformation is even more interesting or amazing. And it takes us into the spiritual and mystical transformation of the aging process. Since most of what we used to be is now just memory and thought and memory. I was this, here's the story of me, I did these things. What would happen if we stopped thinking for a moment and stopped reciting the story of me and examined what remains? Well, what remains when you stop thinking? Consciousness remains. It's what's always here. Now it gets really interesting. Where does consciousness come from? Well, despite the scientific materialists who would say that consciousness is just, an epiphenomenon of the brain, there is so much evidence to the contrary. Out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, mystical experiences. These are all tell us that consciousness is larger than me. It's not limited to me. It's not just there. In fact, in aging, we discover that consciousness, this is so amazing, that consciousness is not just in me. I am in it, and it is the consciousness of the divine. That's what the presence is. It's pure consciousness everywhere, undivided. Only we, in our left hemisphere, conceptual logic, say, we draw these boundaries, and this is me, and that's you, and so you have your set, I have my set, and it's not the same thing, and I have these other ideas, so I don't pay attention to consciousness anyway. But if we stop thinking, all those boundaries go away, and we realize this space, here, now, is alive, and aware and awake, full of love, full of just this incredible light. And so that as we begin to stop thinking and become more and more awake in this process, we begin to change and the world begins to change before us. So ageless, timeless, eternal, purely transformative, this is consciousness. And more to the point, consciousness is God. To be conscious of consciousness itself is to experience God directly. Consciousness is your opening to the divine self. I mean, these are like, whoa. But the mystics have been telling us this for thousands of years. I gotta. In my writing, I always start with the mystics, and I always start with the quotes because I don't want people to think I'm a crazy psychologist. So and they're from across cultures, and this is the stuff they've been saying over and over again that has been suppressed too much by Western conceptual religion to say, well, that's not. We don't want to go there. Even though every single religion was born from a major mystical experience, we are returning to a mystical consciousness. So how does this secret affect Odysseus? Well, Odysseus moves through many adventures, and all along the way, everything he has is destroyed. Talk about, the puzzle pieces falling off the wall. He loses his ships, his crew, his plunder, his control. He floats on a piece of driftwood, naked. He's got nothing. It's been a complete dissolution of himself, but he is growing psychologically. He's more respectful, less arrogant, less manipulative, open to feminine guidance, much clearer about who he is, what he wants, what matters in his soul. And he wants to reconcile with his wife, his son, his father, his homeland. He really wants to come home. This is enormous growth from the warrior to the aging man. So he's begun to experience a new blossom of his true self, and he's also turned inward now for a spiritual understanding of his life and of the divine. He didn't have time to do that because he was fighting all the time before. Now he does. We in this room are pioneers of a new kind of aging. We truly are pioneers if we pay attention. if we open to the possibilities. If you keep thinking about it and say, I don't know what he's talking about, that doesn't make sense to me, all those words will take over your consciousness and the whole thing goes away. When you stop thinking and heighten awareness and become conscious of consciousness itself, you begin to realize it's everywhere. But that, it's just a perceptual shift. Now let's go to secret 3. If that's not enough, right? If that's not enough. The secret 3 says that as the veil of thought dissolves in conscious aging, that's what we're talking about, the veil of thought. As the veil of thought dissolves in conscious aging, heaven on earth begins to shine everywhere, and the world is sacred once again. We have come home from our long journey through the world of thought and invite others to join us in a new consciousness of creation. So this secret reflects a mystical shift. We don't talk about mysticism enough in this culture. It's a mystical shift into a new awakened state of consciousness. But who could believe this? Heaven on earth, if you said that to anybody, they'd say, you are crazy, look around you. But it's not just me saying this. Here are similar proclamations from famous teachers. And I wrote a book called Finding Heaven here. I got like 80 of these. Okay, so if you want to get a lot of testimony from... Mystics are just people who have had firsthand experiences of the divine, and they're profound, and this is what they keep saying. So here's what they've said about heaven on earth. Jesus says, the Father's kingdom is spread out upon the earth and people do not see it. He says, what you look for has come, but you do not know it. And Ramana Maharshi, this wonderful Indian sage, says, this is the kingdom of heaven, he says. Realized beings see this as the kingdom of heaven, whereas the others see it as this world. That's a clue. Thich Nhat Hanh, from the Buddhist perspective, this lovely man, beloved Buddhist monk, who's going home now, by the way, going home to die. He said this, he says, you don't have to die in order to enter the kingdom of God. He says, you don't have to die to enter the kingdom of God. It is better to do it now when you are fully alive. The kingdom doesn't have to come, and you do not have to go to it. It is already here. And he says, there is not one day that I do not walk in the kingdom of God. I do workshops, and I get people, I have these experiential exercises, and I have some people bring in natural things from outdoors, and they go deeply into this state of awareness, which is thought-free, intensely conscious, intensely sensory, intensely staring at this twig or rock. And within minutes, it comes alive. It becomes not only more beautiful and more incredible, more mysterious, it becomes more sacred. And it actually starts changing. And people have said, my leaf started moving. It's everywhere. We don't pay it. We live in a world of thought, of conceptual ideas, and we never see where we really are. But what does all this mean? Well, let's get back to Joe Campbell, because he said something very important. He said, and he says the same thing. He says, this is it. This is Eden. When you see the kingdom spread upon the earth, the old way of living in the world is annihilated. He said, that is the end of the world. The end of the world is not an event to come. It's not the Armageddon. He says, it's an event of psychological transformation, of visionary transformation. You see not a world of solid things, but a world of radiance. It's a visionary. I've been collecting mystical experiences for 25 years, and they say this. And these are not just regular people. I'm not talking about, I've talked to well-known people, but I like the everyday guy who's walking through the field, and suddenly says, the grass under my feet was alive with consciousness, and everything was lit from within as if it were a candle, and there was a sense of love flowing. These are just experiences where the left brain shuts off, the right brain wakes up, and you say, and they often say, and it is such a tragedy. I grieve that this is where we live and nobody notices. This transformation is the essence of the 3 secrets of aging. So, how does this secret affect Odysseus? Well, we see it most clearly actually in his father. But because this is a dream, his father, of course, is part of him too. But Laertes, tending his garden, witnesses the miracle of life in a new and direct way. He senses the divine world everywhere. Doesn't have any other goals. The goals always take you out of the present. It's there and then and what's going to happen and what you should be. It's this space of, whoa. He sees it everywhere. He smells it. He tastes it. He loves the dirt on his hands. He gets it on his clothes. And we do the same thing in so many ways in our aging experience. Sitting quietly in the kitchen, watching dust motes play in the sun, coming through the blinds, and suddenly you're there. Thought stops, the mind stops, everything stops, and the place is lit with beauty. I mean, that's it. I mean, you just fell into it. You didn't even have to try. It's because it was happening naturally. Or holding my grandchildren and just, holding them in my arms and feeling the unity of life and the oneness of our beings being together is part of this, the unity that is the divine. And I mean, there's so many examples of this. This is how our consciousness changes in our aging experience. Like Odysseus, we begin to know that we are standing in the other world as well and sensing the veil lifting. So these secrets are available to all of us if we pay attention and if we value, if we get it. Because otherwise we're going to just say, another secret moment, kind of ashamed. Yeah, kind of flipped out again. I don't know what I was doing. I was lost everywhere. I got to see my doctor again. I'm sure I'm getting Alzheimer's. With our extended longevity, there are going to be more and more of these. So I would like to do an enlightenment survey with you in the audience. So are you up for that, to see if this is already happening to you? Okay, this is going to be fun. No pressure. I'm going to describe some of the changes in consciousness that you may be already experiencing, okay, with this subtle enlightenment process. Your job is just to recognize, say, do I do that? Well, yeah, I guess. Or no, I don't. And just keep a tally, because at the end we're going to see, how many of them you can have. I think I've got like 19 or 20 in the book, but I'm going to do 12 for the sake of time. But here are the kinds of things that are happening that people would dismiss as bizarre, but are really reflections of something else. So keep a running tally, and at the end, add them up. Have you noticed a gradual fading of identity, as if who you were or think you are is no longer very important or even that real? Fading of identity. Have you noticed a kind of a progressive dissolution of time's importance in your life, so that clock, day, planner, calendar no longer drive your day so much, and the distinctions of past, present, and future seem less and less important? Like I sometimes, because I live on an island in the Puget Sound. It's a really peaceful place, but I can't remember what day it is of the week half the time, or what month, or what am I supposed to be doing this week? It's lucky I do have a day planner, but it's not much on it. So anyway, the dissolution of time's importance. It doesn't have that tyranny anymore. Third, have you noticed a loss of high gear? Okay, that hard-driving, goal-oriented focus on getting things done, and a concomitant shift in values from that kind of pressure doing to just a kind of a naturally flowing being. This is the doing to being shift of aging. Have you noticed that? Instead of having this list and marching through, you're getting everything done, you're going, I don't have anything to do. Oh, I think I'll go in the garden. You're moved by the natural being of who you are. Have you noticed a loss of interest and attachment to material things? Things that once seemed important to you. Stuff, clutter, stuff you don't even want anymore. It's hard to do birthdays at our age, isn't it? Like, nobody wants anything. And 5, have you noticed memory failures for dates, names, information, intentions, whatever, habits, whatever, that may trigger concerns about senility, but instead reflect a letting go of information that's just no longer that important? Memory failures that you really have to remember everybody's name and birthday and the dates and what you did then. Because see, when you lose it, then you're entering the mystery. When you have it all figured out, you're living in the left brain. So, and 6, have you noticed moments of silence and stillness and timelessness when it seems as if the mystery of eternity were just leaking into your everyday life, into your world? Moments when you completely lose track of time and whatever you were doing, like that kitchen example. You know? Silence and stillness actually is the doorway to the divine. And so that, have you noticed a larger consciousness existing all around you, filling all space and time, and feeling a sense of comfort, peace, and reassurance in its presence? Have you noticed a sense that there is a presence all around us, holding all of this, gently, patiently, unconditionally loving? Here's a good one. Have you noticed spontaneous spiritual insights that surprise you with their depth and significance? You know, like an idea that, like 30 years ago, you were going to read 5 books about it, still debate whether it was true, and how do we know, and what's it? And now you go, well, of course, that's how it is. Have you noticed an increasing awareness of the sensory richness of everyday life, discovered with that still and empty mind, and an increasing enjoyment of living in the present, sensing every moment as precious, just as it is? This is the word, just moving into the sensory present and just awed at the beauty of it all and preciousness of just being. Have you noticed 10? Have you noticed moments of unexplained and unconditional joy? You know, out of nowhere. Childlike innocence, spontaneous playfulness. It's great with the grandkids, by the way, as long as your knees are still good. Have you noticed a loss of personal boundaries? When it feels as if you are when it feels as if you are when it feels as if you are what you're looking at, okay, allowing you to feel one with a friend, a plant, the earth, or even the whole cosmos. In other words, the boundaries are going, and this is me. I mean, I'm all of this. I'm you. You know, I feel like we are now merged in a way that is like we're in the same thing. It's all the same thing. And the last one, have you noticed a spontaneous welling up of gratitude, concern, and love for the whole world and its peoples and animals and insects and cycles and processes? A spontaneous welling up of love and gratitude. So let's take our survey now. Is everybody done? Have you counted them up? Count them up. So raise your hand if you've experienced 3. How about 5? How about 7? We're still going. How about 8? Okay then. Let's just hear from people 70 and older. Okay, that must be most of us here. Maybe I didn't need to do this. Let's hear from 75 and older then, because the older you are, the probably more of these you will have. How many of you have, if you're 75 or older, raise your hand. Okay, now keep your hand up until it's time to drop it. Keep your hand up if you've noticed 3, 5, 7, 8. Okay, 9. Good. So we are not talking here about senior moments. We are talking here about signs of see, when you understand enlightenment, when you've heard enough examples of mystical experience, these are all facets of the mystical experience. I mean, each one of these and others are literally the mystical experience leaking into your consciousness now, as the structures of mind become less important. You know, early in life, we get all this education, and we have to do it exactly right. We have to believe things that we believe, and the left brain is like a closed system. And then as we get older, first of all, we forget that stuff because that's the kids learning that, and we're way out of the educational mode now. But and more important than that, we're drawn into another state of consciousness just naturally, and in this other state, we just feel this love for each other, this wandering, this awakened consciousness that transforms the world around us, and it is this consciousness that reveals the presence of heaven on earth. So we are changing the frame here. Aging is not about decline, it's about awakening. Yay! So that's a good place for me to stop yakking, but we have a couple minutes for questions or comments. Anybody want to say or ask or anything, or dance a dance, or... Then, oh, good. There's a man, my friend, Ed. Oh, apparently it's not you yet.
There's a theme.
No, you just got bypassed. No.
I just want to say that having attended quite a few men's groups and consciousness-raising groups, this has been a wonderful capsulization and even enhancement over all of those that I've previously been at.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
I was just noting that throughout so much what you said, and so much in the literature, not only of aging, but of enlightenment and of all the philosophical traditions of the past, there is this sense of remarriage, of getting out of duality thinking, right and left, right or wrong, male or female, soul or role. And it's as if there is a time in life, in the awakening moment, when there's kind of a remarriage. We experience marriage at a younger time, most of us do, and that's transformational. But now, in this time of life, there is this sense of getting out of this dualism that pervades our culture and getting into one. Parker Palmer, who's a native person who loves to talk about this very thing, the inner and the outer.
Man, yeah.
And he uses the Möbius band as an example, where you take a strip of paper and one side is outside, one side is inside, but when you twist it and put them together in a circle and you trace around, the inner and the outer become one. And that's kind of what I hear you talking about.
Yeah.
You want to say a little bit more about this idea of marriage?
Yeah, say how that feels to you. How this marriage, what does it feel like to live in that, to experience it?
And a sense of intimacy, a sense of connectedness, a sense of well-being, of having become. That's all, I think. Different people talk about it in different ways.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's a feeling that you can have. It's fundamentally real once you tap into it. And then it changes you. Because you no longer judge things, you just are drawn to them. There's a sense of wanting unity everywhere. Yeah. And the inside is the outside. There is when the boundaries go in and out, what's the difference,
I attended thinking I was going to hear about men, but I heard about men. I heard about all of us.
All of us.
And I thought it was wonderful in that sense. I took so many notes thinking my husband is gone, but I have a lot of sons. I thought, I'll use this for the boys. No, I'm using it for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, they have to make their own mistakes.
How do we, as women, integrate this Odyssey process into our process of aging, particularly if our men die before the process is over?
So how do you integrate this aging, this...
The Odyssey.
Oh, the Odyssey process.
For women.
For women, okay.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's not it. Oh, thank you.
How do women integrate the men's Odyssey
That
process?
is an excellent question. Really an excellent question. You know, in Odysseus and Penelope had to come back together again. And they had been apart for a long time, and she gravely mistrusted him. She wasn't even sure he was Odysseus because he didn't seem like the guy that she knew once. I think it has so much to do. Let me see. I think we have to work on ourselves first. I think it's always about, whether it's meditation or journal writing or spiritual direction or whatever it is, to come into your own natural being, because the deeper you go into who you are, the easier it is to see and love the people you're with. You know, there was a guy that wrote about the stages of marriage, and he likened them to the stages of death and dying. But it made sense, actually. He says, you know, you first get married and you're full of denial. Everything is great between us. You know, everything's wonderful. And then comes anger. That's not what I expect. I don't want that. And then comes bargaining, like, well, only if you would change, then where's marital therapy? We're going to get this thing worked out. And then comes depression, in the sense that I realize I'm not going to change you. I am not going to change you. You're not going to change me. And there's this hopeless. But then there's an acceptance that you are what you are, and I am what I am. And can we, in our marriage or in our relationship, really make the space inside? I mean, I look at my wife now, and I have these little conversations going on in my head. I'm saying, oh, she's doing this, and I used to get mad about this, but look, it makes her so happy. Why would I get mad about it anymore? You know, but it's about my opening that space inside for her to be just exactly the way she is and not being in power struggles or anything. So I think we work on ourselves, and in the process of working on ourselves, an unconditional acceptance of the other comes up. And then we make friends in marriage in a new way, you know, in a new kind of relationship. Our marriage is not just the one relationship. It goes through, like, you know, all these different relationship phases, unless it's locked, and then at that point it's risky because too much gets stuffed in the leather bag. Did that help? No. Maybe somebody else can answer it better. Did you want to? Yeah, go, you say it. I need all the help I can get.
Hold on. Wait.
Rick, say me.
Jenny's feedback was mine similarly, because I feel I'm a daughter of the patriarchy and my father's daughter, in addition to being a woman and having my process. But that if a partner has been lost or is not present, the work can continue psychologically in you.
Oh, are you talking about someone who's gone?
Yes.
Oh, I missed that. Yeah. Oh, I want to tell you that the relationships don't end. I'm really clear about this, that we can have ongoing relationships with the people we love and from the next world, and it's not woo-woo stuff. They appear in our dreams. I've had dreams of my dead son come and give me hugs that are as physical and real and substantial as anything I've ever felt before. And so I think the thing is to continue. Ira Progoff had this wonderful dialogue process. I don't know if any of you did that, but anyway. Start a dialogue with a person, write letters, or just have a conversation. And as you do it, you'll notice stuff coming back to you from his side. And you'll know it's a genuine dialogue with someone from the other side because it will surprise you. There will be things said that you... So start from the heart, say what you want to say, sit in silence, and imagine something is being said. First you have to prime the pump. Sometimes you have to say it for them a couple times. But then once you get the dialogue started, new information will come out, and you'll begin. I am constantly having a conversation with my father. Dad, he's with me, you know. He tells me how to handle things sometimes. I really appreciate his showing up. I hope that helps, because it really is. Scientific materialism has been hard on the paranormal.
From what you were saying, just about this, the hugs and everything, because the brain perceives that as real.
Yes.
As it does dreams. Dreams are real to the brain.
Dreams are real.
But my question was, how do we take this divine consciousness or light that we're starting to experience and impart it to others or share it? Because obviously you do it. You're teaching us all of these things that we may not have verbalized before, but isn't it meant to be shared? Or is it just for our own
It
pleasure?
can't just be for ourselves, but it's really hard to impose. I mean, this is why religious conversations are so futile, because there's so many boundaries and points of view. I think that it starts with just coming from that space of love that is awakened in that, and just exemplifying it. I think that's really the place. And then I think it's also contagious. The more you feel it, the more people around you feel it, the more, it's like we're tuning forks with each other. But it can't. It's going to be subtle at first. It's going to be nonverbal at first, and you can't have any. And the thing is, you can't have any goals or expectations. It's just be in that, and have conversations with God. I mean, have a conversation with God about this problem. And if you have a dialogue with the divine, stuff will happen, and it will answer these questions for you. And that's not woo-woo either. I'm a psychologist, by the way. I know woo-woo. See, I used to work in psych units. I know woo-woo. Is that it? Okay, I think we're at our time.
Thank you so much.
Well, I love your wishes. I've been reading them over lunch, and I'd like, if it's okay with you, and then anybody tell me if it's not okay, I'd like to, type them up and put them on my website if you want to see what all of you were thinking about when I asked this question about your most fervent wishes in aging. So is that okay with everybody? I'll read some now because they're just sweet and powerful and profound and real. So, making peace with a life that is well lived but is not extraordinary as I had expected, coming to terms with being ordinary. Yay! I want to be significant, to have made a difference in the world, to be known and to be peaceful, to be enough, to communicate for the good of the next generation. I want to continue to explore and come to understand the mystery of life and my part in that mystery. What I want most from aging: ability to face dying peacefully, be content with who I really am after I find out, become more compassionate and not angry about what I need to do. Good health, continue great relationships with children and grandchildren and friends. To deepen my relationships with true intimacy. To get in touch with inner self, be not identified with my work, but be more in touch with love relationships and accept it as enough. I mean, these are really, all of us could have said any of these. They're really quite beautiful. I won't. So I'll save the rest and put them on my website, and probably take me a couple weeks, and they will be there. So this afternoon, welcome back. I know you guys are a good bunch. Whenever I'm at a place and I just feel happy, I know it's a good place. You guys make me happy. This is a beautiful community of people, and I'm just so grateful to have been invited to be with you. And I love you all. And let's be family. Let's be a tribe. This is a good place to be. So welcome back. Any questions before? But this afternoon we're going to talk about fairy tales, elder fairy tales, both with male protagonists, so we kind of get back in touch with a male theme. But the themes, of course, are universal, so this stuff will apply to everybody. So any questions about what we've done so far, or should we just dive in? Dive in. Okay. I have two short elder tales that will take us into the spiritual and mystical transformations described in the Three Secrets of Aging. As we explore these stories, let them symbolize your aging. Every story is about you, because these are archetypal. These are collective stories from the unconscious, and that unconscious fills all of us with its meaning. It comes up through all of us like seeds. As you listen, and here's the key detail, as you listen to each story, notice when some detail in the story shocks you, or surprises you, or disturbs you, or puzzles you, or pushes a button, okay? Because that's going to be your personal entrance into a universal story, okay? So I'm reading along and I say something and you go, whoa, what was that about? Let that be your part of the story and your way into it. Okay, so it's after lunch. This is like preschool. It's nap time now. You can kind of settle back if you want. No snoring. So I'm going to tell you a story. Close your eyes if you like. Remember how good it felt to be, on one of those little cots and the teacher's going to read you a story. And close your eyes. Watch the curtains on your inner movie theater just beginning to open now. And let this first story come inside you and come alive. Let that same innocent, vivid, magical imagination that you had in childhood, let it awaken here. Our first story is called King O'Toole and His Goose. In the long ago past of Ireland, in another time, in a time before time, there lived a king named O'Toole, and a fine king he was. He supported the parishes in his kingdom, lived his life fully, and most of all, he loved the hunting sport. In the years of his prime off, he'd be riding across valleys and mountains of the land from sunup to sundown, and fine times they were for this jolly and portly prince. Can you see him galloping over hill and dale, chasing those deer, just having a grand old time? But in the way of all things, time eventually changed the king. His body grew old, his limbs stiffened, and one day, even his heart failed him. Stricken, he had no choice but to give up the hunting life, and a mighty sad day it was. Well, for want of sport and diversion, the poor old king at last took on a goose. A goose, you say? What need a king of a goose? But 'tis the truth I am telling you, and the king loved to watch his goose swim across the lake, dive for trout, and bring him a fresh fish every Friday for dinner. Every other day, the goose would fly completely around the lake, thrilling the crippled old monarch with her sporting ways. Just picture that. This goose was so much fun for the king, diving for fish and flying around the lake. Well, the old king was happily diverted like this for some years. He just had a great old time. But eventually, the goose got old too, just like her master, and could no longer fill his life with sport and diversion. It was a cruel, cruel ending, the king lamented. And one day, he approached the edge of the lake with the thought of throwing himself into its cold, dark waters. Just look at that. There he was, standing there in the cold wind with the water at his feet. Just as he turned to face the bitter end, the king spied a fair young man, modest in dress and manner, who approached him directly. "God save you," said the king to the stranger. "And God save you, King O'Toole," said the young man. Startled, the king replied, "Surely I am the King O'Toole, the sovereign prince of these 7 parishes, but how came ye to know me?" "Ah, never you mind," answered Saint Kevin, who was himself the great Irish saint in disguise. But may I inquire about your goose, King O'Toole?" "Ah!" cried the king, "how do you know about my goose?" "It matters not," replied the young man, but I am an honest man who earns his keep by making old things new again." "A tinker, you say?" asked the king. "No itinerant mender of pots and kettles am I," said the young man. But, what would you say if I could make your goose as good as new?" Well, no one in all the lands could have spoken happier words to the king, who instantly whistled for his goose. Like a loyal hound dog, the crippled old bird waddled over to her master, and St. Kevin could see how alike they were as peas in a pod. And so he said, "I'll do it." "And if you do," cried the king, "you will be the cleverest fellow in all these parts." "But," said the young man, "you must offer more than praise for this deed. What will you give to have this goose be good as new?" "Anything you ask," replied the king without hesitation. Anything at all. Now, that's the way of the bargain, the young man said, but here is the final price. Will you surrender to me all the countryside the goose flies over on her first jaunt after I make her new again? And again, without hesitation, the king replied, I will indeed. Then it's a bargain, said St. Kevin, and he picked up the poor old goose by her wings, made the sign of the cross, and threw her into the air. Miraculously, this tired old bird was new again, flying swift as an eagle, darting like a swallow, happy as a lark. A soft rain fell from the heavens as the goose landed at the king's feet. Ah, what do you say, King O'Toole? Asked the young man. I say, 'tis a blessed day my goose flies again. And what else do you say? I say, you are the cleverest lad in all the world. Ah, but what of our bargain? Persisted St. Kevin. Am I given all the territory your goose just flew over? Will you keep your promise to me? Yes, replied the king, and you're welcome to it, though it's my entire kingdom and all I have left. Then St. Kevin said to the king, 'Tis a wise man you are, King O'Toole, for if you had not kept your bargain, the devil himself would have bit your goose and he'd never fly again. Now, St. Kevin was well pleased with the king and finally revealed his true identity. The king dropped to his knees, paid the proper respect. Then at last, St. Kevin explained. I came to test you, King O'Toole, and you were a true and decent man. You may stay on your land, and I will support you. And so the king's beloved goose was returned to him, good as new, giving him pleasure every day until he died. On that fateful Friday, the goose dived into the lake after a trout, struck an eel instead, and died instantly. The eel, however, would not eat the goose for fear of anything the blessed St. Kevin had touched. And so ends the story of King O'Toole and his goose. You can open your eyes. Wow, that's a fun story, huh? I love this story. You're going to find out all sorts of interesting things about it. So fairy tales are teaching stories, and as we learn the secret language that's in a myth and fairy tale, a magical treasure chest of insights will open. So here's my plan. I want them to open in you. I want you to form small groups at your table of, 3 or 4 people. So if you have more than that, just shift a table. So do that right now, and I'll give you the next instruction. So small groups of 3 or 4. Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, I'm going to give you some simple ideas on how to understand fairy tales and unpack the meaning of this tale for yourself and your own life. So we will go one idea at a time. I'll give you the idea, you'll work on it a little bit, and then we'll give you the next idea. Let the understanding of this story emerge organically. Don't try to figure it out from the start. Just let these ideas percolate and bubble around in you until at the end things suddenly make sense. So here are the principles. First of all, I want you to share what was that one detail in the story that got you. Okay, just go around the group and share what was the detail that really pulled your attention. Go ahead. Oh, and introduce yourselves if you don't know each other. That's a good place to start. Then say the detail. Okay, so let me have your attention back again. Woo-hoo. Hello. Hello. I can't whistle. So anyway, so here's your second instruction. Your second instruction for how to come into this particular story. Stories like this are really just dreams, and so you can use this. These are the same kind of techniques we use in understanding dreams. So the second technique is from the psychoanalytic mode. It's called free association. So your job is to let go of any logic or thinking or what you think should be or anything like that, and just blurt out whatever happened to you in this story. Just say anything that was triggered by this story and share what your first impressions were, your first associations. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let me have your attention. Let's move on to the next technique. So in this one, I want you to, this is from the Gestalt tradition of dream interpretation. I want you to become one of the figures in the dream, okay? You can be the king, the goose, King O'Toole, the eel, the lake. You can be whatever you want, any part of it. And once you identify the part you are, that allows you to be in the dream. And then from speaking from that part, for that part, tell me what you're doing there, how you feel, what you want. I mean, if I'm the eel, what am I thinking down here waiting for this thing to happen, okay? So there's your job. This is the Gestalt. Be part of the dream, pick your part, and then go around the group and share from that person, from that part's point of view, what he or she is or it is doing in the story as you. Okay, let me stop you for here so we don't run out of time. Whoa! Hello again. And by the way, there's way too much laughter going on in here. Way too many people are laughing. I think that's wonderful. You know, and I don't want anybody to tell me that the king's goose was cooked. That is off limits. Okay, so here's your next instruction. I want you as a group to retell the story in your own words. It's a parable, okay? It's a parable of something. Retell the story in your own words, and what's the moral of this parable? You've been gathering information, gathering impressions and feelings and images and stuff. As a group, see if you can get a sense of the parable. What's the teaching here? Okay, and one last instruction. Let me have your attention for what your final instruction. Hello. Who whistles loud? I wish I could whistle. So anyway, here your final instruction is this. Tell this story as your own story. How is this story about you and about your life? Okay, so let me have your attention again. Hello, attention again. So I wish... Hello? Hello? Everybody? Hello? I wish we had way more time because, as you can see, you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the story. And if we'd had all day, we could all take turns being the goose flying into the lake and seeing what's really down there. But anyway, so what I want to do now is just find a spokesperson in your group who's willing to say something, and let's hear from, 3, 4 of the groups about what is the story about? What was your experience like, and what did you get? Who's brave? Who wants to take it? First you have to find out who's the spokesperson. Find yourself a good spokesperson. You will choose or be chosen. Chosen. Okay, do we have spokespeople? All right, let's start with him. Jim, you've been chosen.
Forget that.
Wow. Okay, our group was kind of puzzled by the tale and trying to figure out what are the different parts, and tried to put them all together and chose a part to play. And so one was an eel, one was the sea itself, and the other was the king. And we enjoyed it.
It's fun. How did you kind of get a sense for the message or the moral?
Did we?
Moving right along.
It's coming.
It's coming.
To be continued.
Thank you, sir. Okay, who's up next? Oh, good.
Okay, we were one step ahead of you because we did our individual interpretation before we thought there was one parable. And we looked upon the king as his kingly duties were complete, and he chose to be alone. and that the goose represented what was precious in his life, and the goose could soar the sky and get an aerial view to see the whole picture. And the king would have liked to have done the same, and it was symbolic that the goose came back to where he started.
Good, thank you. We were getting there. Who's up?
Our table would just add a couple things to this beautiful story over here. One was we thought the eel was an unexpected thing that would happen because, well, after all, the goose had been diving there for years, and the eel had never bothered the goose before. And we were also surprised with how fast the transformation happened with just a cross and a shoo for the goose.
Good, okay. Who's up? Who else has something to share? This group looks busy.
They've already pointed at you.
Yeah, they pointed at you. You've been chosen. Go ahead.
As the undesignated speaker, I think we tried to retell the story from our own point of view, and I think the common thread was obviously letting go and experiencing in that process joy, gratitude, peace were three particular experiences that we talked about. So the death and dying, the resurrection, that was all a part of the story.
Yeah. Good. We're getting all the themes out here. One more, and then I'll kind of give you sort of an overview.
I did that.
That's how it works.
Patriarchy rules here. They've elected me.
Stand up to the patriarchy.
So we sort of were along the same lines. We thought the goose was the redemption, if you will, coming back, and giving up of the land was the giving up of the material things, and he was fine with that. And then the goose came back to where he started, as somebody already said. So, is that what else were we talking about?
Good.
Okay.
Good. So let me just give you some general thoughts about that. These are my associations. Oh yes, one more. Hey.
You can't cheat death.
No. There's a bottom line. That's the story.
The goose dies at the end, no matter.
That's it.
Nothing you could do.
You pass. Yes.
One other point that we came up with, which I thought was pretty good, is the bargaining process.
Yeah.
Right? When you want to change something.
Yeah. And what does Kubler-Ross say about bargaining with death? Yeah. Good? Okay. So let me tell you some of my associations with, and doesn't make them any righter or wronger than yours. Just if it pushes a button, if it seems like it makes sense, then it may be connected to your interior, but there's as many different interpretations to this story as there are people in the room, and each one is at this deepest level, deeply personal. So, by the age of the king and his failing health, I think we realize this is a winter story about aging. King O'Toole really represents every man or every person. I mean, he's the one that is facing this experience, and so he represents all of us. And actually, he's fairly well respected, even though I know what you're saying. We don't know anything about him, and was he a good king or a bad king? All he did was ride his horses. But the way he responds to St. Kevin suggests that he's got a certain amount of maturity. I mean, he could have just grabbed and resisted and so forth, but he was seen to be spiritually mature in how easily he went along with the exchange. So anyway, he's really started the road of trials. His initiation, as we were talking this morning, has begun. His heart attack was his initiation, and then he needed to find a way to deal with it. Now, the goose is a wonderful character here, and let me throw out some ideas to see what you think. So I think the goose represents the king's soul. Why? Well, first of all, because he looks and acts and waddles and appears exactly like the king, and this is what St. Kevin noticed. Secondly, because it's a she, and our soul is often in the Jungian literature and in the literature in general, the conscious sexual self, so he's a guy, and so she's his soul mate, his soul there. And thirdly, because the goose has this capacity to rise above the physical and soar over the world and explore. If in dreams and fairy tales, bodies of water like this lake and like the sea often represent the unconscious. It's a huge dark place, easy to project all of our stuff into. So this goose, he can't do what he used to do, so he turns to his soul to give him a new life for a number of years, and she shows him the depth and breadth of the unconscious. It shows him what's in there, shows him, what his life is all about, pulling gifts back from the unconscious to give him every Friday. So she is nurturing him in a way that we need our souls to do when we reach a point in time when we can't do things physically, when we need to turn to our soul for life-giving experience. And also, birds are typically symbolized as capable of moving from heaven to earth, so that makes it as a soul-like figure, spiritual figure, and souls are often identified or described as the imagination, the flights of imagination. So his soul has these flights of imagination. So here's a guy gets old, has a heart attack, and now he's wisely enough turns to his soul. But so he has this wonderful experience, but even the soul gets old. It gets tired of being on this plane of existence, and it's time to move on. But the king mistakes the literal for the symbolic. What needs to happen is he needs to give up his old life to be death and resurrection, to be born again, a new kind of life. But he takes it literally and starts walking into the lake. And just as he does that, St. Kevin appears, just as he should. Because St. Kevin, in many respects, is the symbol of death, who comes to us, and God, the symbol of God, who comes to us at the end of our life as an illness, as a premonition, as a dream, as an accident or something, to remind us to take a look at what the end game is going to be all about. So the king's spiritual maturity shows up in the fact that he immediately recognizes the validity of this exchanging everything that he thought he was, this kingdom, this kingness, this land that he has, and he gives it all up for a second life. And so what happens is that when he does this, when he gives up his old life like Odysseus does and like we all must do in aging, he has given back the divine world. That he's in the kingdom, but it's now the St. Kevin's kingdom, not his. So he's returned to the kingdom of the divine, which he had assumed was belonging to him. Giving it up, he found out where he really lived and who really owns the kingdom. So he passed this test of initiation and this transformation of self and consciousness. And the eel, I don't know I've wrestled with the eel for a long time. The only thing I ever came up with was it might represent the Kundalini. Base of the spine comes up, powerful force in Hindu mythology. But what I want to emphasize here is that this story asks us to look at several things about our aging experience. How will you turn to your soul when your health declines? How will you ask your soul to fly free of your body and bring you back gifts of what's out there in the other world and the unconscious and the collective unconscious, and show you the way? Now, and it may be, and what will you do to have these kind of flights of fantasy and imagination? Is it going to be? You could be writing, it could be poetry, philosophy, religion, history, anything that allows your mind to be free to explore the meaning and possibilities of this time of life. That's what the goose was, I think, giving him. And so the second question I would have for you is, how will you use the losses and trials of aging as an initiation into this new life? I mean, this stuff St. Kevin's going to show up, he's going to show up for all of us. And so do we willingly give up all that we used to be born in recognizing that we have another life ahead? Or will we start bartering with do it, but not this time, or I'll do a little bit, but you have to give me more? I mean, this is not a real negotiation. And so when God comes disguised as an illness or an accident, will you make this bargain with an open heart, or will you complain that it's unfair and I shouldn't have to do this. So those are, I think, some additional themes. And if we had all day, we would have played all the parts, and we would have been discovering more and more what you already know about this. But I think does that make sense in a sort of a general way? Okay, I've got a second story for you. Yes, sir. No, this is an ancient Irish story. It's in my book, The Elder Tales. So one more story. I love this story. And this is, I think, a relatively new story. So that was an old elder fairy tale. This is going to be a new elder fairy tale. Nobody seems to know where it came from, but Scott Peck had a version of it. So he says he doesn't know where he got it, but I'm using it. So the second story, how many to yourself, a desire to experience the divine firsthand all around you, maybe in your own nature? Well, this story is about that. This is a story that speaks of that possibility. So, like all good stories, it has many versions. So when you're ready, sit back, relax, close your eyes if you want, and let's go into our second elder fairy tale. This story concerns a monastery that had fallen on hard times. There were only 5 monks left in the decaying mother house, an abbot, 4 others, all over 70. Clearly, it was a dying order. As the abbot agonized over the imminent death of his order, it occurred to him to ask a wise old rabbi staying nearby for advice on how to save his dying order. But the old rabbi could only commiserate. "I know how it is," he lamented. "The spirit has gone out of the people." So the old abbot and the old rabbi wept together. Finally, when it was time to leave, the abbot asked, "Is there nothing you could tell me, no piece of advice you can give me that would help me save my dying order?" And the rabbi responded, "I have no advice for you. The only thing I can say is that one of you is the Messiah." When the abbot returned to the monastery, his fellow monks gathered around him and asked what he had learned from the rabbi. The abbot said, he couldn't help. We just wept and read the Torah together. The only thing he did say, just as I was leaving, was that the Messiah is one of us. I don't know what he meant. In the days and weeks and months that followed, the old monks pondered this cryptic message. The Messiah is one of us? Could he have possibly meant one of us here at the monastery? But which one? As they contemplated this question, the old monks began to treat each other with extraordinary respect and reverence, in the off chance that one among them might be the Messiah, and in the off chance that each monk himself might be the Messiah, they began to treat themselves with extraordinary reverence and respect. Now, people from the village still occasionally came to visit the monastery on sunny days to walk its lovely grounds and picnic. But now, as they visited, they sensed the aura of something new and sacred radiating from the 5 monks and permeating the atmosphere of the place. Hardly knowing why, the people began to come back more and more and bring their friends to this special place. A young man even asked to join the monastery, and then another, and another. Within a few years, the monastery had once again become a thriving order, and thanks to the rabbi's cryptic comment, a vibrant center of light and spirituality in the realm. And that's the story of the rabbi's gift. So let's go back into our groups. Let's start with the detail. What detail of this story got you? And we'll move through it a little bit more quickly so we can get to the end. But what detail grabbed you, and what are your free associations to the story? Let's just get started with those first 2. Okay, and now I want you to become a figure in the dream. pick one of the figures in the dream, the abbot or one of his monks or anybody, any part of the dream you want, and speak from that part. Become that figure and talk about what you see and feel and what this dream is. And then when you can, connect that to your own experience. Okay, so let me give you your last instruction before we debrief the whole thing. Let me get your attention for the last instruction, and then we'll take a look at this from an overview. I want you as a group to retell the story in your own words, like we did before, and to connect it in some way to your own story. How might this be your story? Okay, then, let me get your attention back up front again. Bring your attention back to the front. Hello, hello. This is good. You guys are into it. It's really great. Hello. Hello. Okay. I love how much you're into this story. But let's hear from some of your groups about what did this story bring up for you? I mean, Go, Rick.
I got my hearing aids on now.
Hold on. Nope.
Story that Abbott
Wait.
hearing aids on. So he thought that the rabbi had said.
You're not listening with your hearing aids.
I thought that the rabbi, the abbot thought that the rabbi had said, the Messiah, not the Messiah is one of you, but the Messiah is one with you. Okay? Misunderstanding.
It was all a misunderstanding.
Creative misunderstanding.
Thank you for your help on that. Who else? There's the one over there. Rick, you're fired.
So it brought up a really true story for both myself and my husband. There's a monastery in Crete, and there is a young man there. He's about 50 now. He moved from New York City to Crete to join this monastery, and it was quite small. There were, I think, only 6 or 7 monks there. And about a year after he was there, he was diagnosed with ALS. And he said to the abbot, I'm going to have to leave because I'm ill, and I don't want you to have to take care of me. And the abbot said to him, you will stay, we will care for you, and you will pray for us. And it's just a beautiful story. Aww. And I will tell you that today, there are thousands of people throughout the world that know Father Sophroni. And they communicate with him, and he is a spiritual guide.
That gives me the chills. That's beautiful. Thank you. Oh, my gosh. Oh.
This is democratic. We have a democratic process over here. I lost. Okay, our story, I want to use maybe the coach's story here. The coach said that before every football game, in preparation, he tells his players that one of you is going to play a good game. And now we're going to go up against a lot of adversity here, but you guys, one of you is really going to be the star. One of you is going to help us win. One of you is going to, and it's all up to you to win this game. We're all going to do this together. Now, the part I saw in it was, as I told the guys, as the abbot or the rabbi and the abbot went back and told them what Jesus was there. Well, they didn't realize that the Spirit of the Lord is in everybody, and the kingdom of heaven is within. And when they were headed to the kingdom of heaven, and they treated each other accordingly. With that, I pass.
Beautiful, beautiful, good. Anybody else? Back in the corner? Okay.
I couldn't help but think of this monastery as the United States of America.
becoming a dying institution. Democracy is dying. Do you hear the quiet? The angels visiting. There is a need for us to see the worth and value, to see Christ or see God or see the divine in each of us, no matter what our political persuasions are. Serena Jones wrote a terrific article in the New Yorker, March 11th. I just read it this morning about her challenge to forgive Timothy McVeigh. She's from Oklahoma City, to really forgive him. And her article is entitled something like Maintaining Grace in the Age of Trump. And, so many of us don't agree with President Trump. It's easy, it's automatic almost for me, I'll speak for myself too, be negative, harsh, critical, judgmental, and not to be like in the story, So I think the calling here from the story is for us as Americans to respect each other.
Thank you. I'll get back to that. That's very important. Anybody else? Any other brave or wise souls? There's one.
We were talking about the institutional church and kind of getting into like that monastery, just dying. In my own experience, I was a parish pastor, and I felt like I was trying to get this elephant up, and I'd get the hind end up and the front end would fall down. And then I left parish ministry and went into chaplaincy. And I found there were so many people who were hungry and who were searching and who were thirsty. And that just revitalized me.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, thank you. One more in the back or side or?
This parable brought back an experience I had a couple decades ago when I was in Rome, and I just had the afternoon off. I was traveling with the choir, and I decided to walk through the park. And I didn't know this was the cultural norm at the time, but as I was walking through the park by myself, every man that passed me would say, "Hello, beautiful." And so they say, "Ah, bella," every time they walked by. And by the first time I thought, "Oh, that's kind of nice." Well, by the 10th or 12th person, every time a guy passed me, he said I was beautiful. Like, well, yeah. I am beautiful. You start thinking, and this story reminds me of that. It reminds me of, when people start speaking into the lives of others, the beauty that they see. And, I started thinking, yeah, I am a beautiful person. And that's exactly what's happening in this tale, is that they start to speak the beauty into each other's lives as they're searching for the Creator that is within all of us.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, great. Okay. One more. There's one behind you, I think.
I often tell a little story. It's a true story. There's a book about this story called The People's Parish. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's about a young priest down in St. Louis who was sent to a dying congregation in a racially changing neighborhood. And his bishop, when he sent him, said to him, the most important thing is to do daily Mass. Well, this fellow didn't even have people coming on weekends to Mass, let alone daily Mass. So he did daily Mass for a little while, and then he gave up, and the phone rang one day, and the bishop said, "How's that daily Mass going?" And he said, "Oh, I gave that up, nobody comes." And he said, "No, I told you to do daily Mass." So he went into the congregation the next day, into the sanctuary, and he thought, well, if I've got to do this, let's make it interesting. And he began to sing and dance and play and act out the readings, and he was all by himself, and it became this extraordinary, extravagant ritual every day. And one day, someone from the neighborhood happened to come into the congregation and sit in the back and see this. and they thought he was crazy. And so they went out and they said to their neighbor, you got to come see this. This guy's really crazy. You got to experience this. And so he brought back his neighbor the next day, and the neighbor brought a neighbor, and the neighbor brought a neighbor, and not too long after that, they had 100 people at daily mass. And they said, don't change anything. Do exactly the way you do it. So he still sang and danced and acted out the lessons and things, and it brought, new life to the parish. Interesting book, probably out of print.
Is that a true story?
It's a true story.
Oh, boy.
The name of the book is called The People's Parish.
The People's Parish. Yeah. That's lovely. Okay, then, good. So we need to wrap up soon. I just want to close with some thoughts of my own about this story. I mean, the question I ask myself is, was this transformation of the monastery just a product of good behavior and referential attitudes, or could it be that the idea of being the Messiah began to work in every monk? And maybe the rabbi's hint actually led to an awakening of that kind of Christ consciousness, that kind of awakened consciousness, free from the idea of who you think you are. When that's gone, this other consciousness rises, so that they became divine humans in some way, and that spread through their monastery. And perhaps the more they lived it and felt it and focused on it, the more it became for them and for their order. So this story, I think, is about that possibility, and I think that's what we're all talking about in us. And the possibility of aging is to transcend who you used to be and what you used to be, because that's just a fiction now. Of course, it was always a fiction, but this time you really realize it's a fiction. And open consciousness to consciousness itself and let it become the self that you live from, and something very different can happen. So I want to close with a few remarks, picking up on your remark, which I thought was really very timely. So by summary, today we looked at the Odyssey, this great story about Odysseus coming home from the war, and the profound journey a man takes to go from middle age to, real wisdom figure or family person or awakened person. It's a long and powerful journey. And all the tasks and lessons he'll confront that will change him forever. Okay, we are changed forever in this journey. And we saw the same journey. The patriarchy struggled to transition from a warrior culture to a consciousness of community and positive masculinity. And we looked at the three secrets and how they're working on us all the time now. Even in this moment, they're working on us. You stop thinking, you realize it's all here. And by the way, you are all infinitely beautiful. I mean, I move into that consciousness easily. You guys are so beautiful. The way the light is on your faces, and the way this room is infinitely precious with good people and joy, and this is a great place to be. So I want to thank you for that. And we looked at these two stories, which really, in some magical way, capture the same thing about how we give up the personal kingdom for the divine kingdom, and how we awaken consciousness into this new way of being in the world. So, but I want to close with a couple of comments about the larger implication of all of this. Visionaries of our time, the Thomas Berrys and Joanna Macy's and Matthew Foxes and so many others, describe this global warming, this climate disruption, is really the greatest modern threat to humanity that exists. How do we respond to that threat? It is huge. This freight train is coming down the tracks at us, and so many people are hardly paying attention. But it's changing. In this escalating time of disruption, the modern world appears to be rapidly mobilizing. We saw that at the Parliament of World Religions, where they talked about it all the time. In the earth-restoring activism of aging organizations and green politics and local governments and schools and universities. And the governor from my state of Washington is running for president on the climate change plank. I'm so proud of him. So things are changing, but they're not nearly mobilized enough. We are each part of this mobilization. We are each a part of it. And indeed, I think the divine world is responding through us. And so how does that work? Matthew Fox, who's been really my mentor over the recent years, says this. He says, cosmology teaches us that there is only one work going on in the universe, the great work of creation unfolding. the work of creation unfolding. And I believe this great work unfolds through us. Okay? When we wake up to where and who we really are, like these stories are teaching us, and we express the divine aliveness, not only in the true self that's come alive again, but in this awakened consciousness that's always been here, we will join this great work and begin to make a difference in big and little ways. You don't have to save the world, you just have to be conscious of the world as it is and live from that consciousness. The great work arises in the depths of our own being, and we, as a result, are moved by that divinity, that energy of divinity, to respond in all different forms of sacred activism. Sacred activism is really becoming a key phrase in the conscious aging movement. And I'm proposing that mystical consciousness, our long forgotten right hemisphere ability to be fully awake, to not be taken over and caged by the left brain, but fully awake to the isness of creation, the isness of being, the direct perception of creation, can be a critical resource for dissolving these addictive beliefs of the patriarchy that run over our world like a tractor. How would that help? I think this is what's going to happen. You know, climate change is a giant disaster. It's a crisis. What kind of consciousness do you have when a crisis is happening? You have this wide awake, alert, you know, when your car starts rolling, you know, and you can't do anything about it, and suddenly time stops and everything stops and your mind wakes up in this incredible way. That's mystical consciousness. And if we can just resist the temptation to fall into hysterical reactivity, but instead stand in that awakened consciousness, you know, is a consciousness that it completely erases your stock portfolio, your identity, your career, your big plans for the future. Everything is gone, but now. But here, but this. And in this intense awareness of creation, she will show us how we are to live. And if we can just survive this, we will bring the feminine and the masculine together and make a whole new world, this time created on love. Created on genuine oneness of each other and the whole thing. So I'm scared and I'm excited, and I think we are all on the same page of waking up to this disaster and living through it to create a new world. The patriarchy won't survive this disaster. So in conclusion, the direct perception of sacred reality is the ultimate cure, I think, for patriarchal greed and the violence of driving climate change, and we are witnessing the arc of human history that arrives at a very perilous moment. Enlightened elders, which is us and you and me, must be part of this great work of creation unfolding, and we can do it. So thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure being with you today. I hope this stuff has stirred up thoughts and ideas, and that will continue to work on you and for the days and weeks ahead. If you have any questions, you can come to my website, johnrobinson.org. You can contact me, and I always answer my emails. I'm one of those guys that really answers emails. So may your spiritual aging be bountiful and generous and joyful. Thank you. You've been wonderful.